Hey, in this video we'll learn how to use the splines. A spline is a curve constructed from control points, and the Unreal Engine allows us to put 3D models along those curves. So in our context, a spline is a tool we can use to create repeated objects along curves, like walls, roads, and lines of decorating objects. As always, it can be done in various ways. Splines are managed in this window here. First of all, you have a help button. When you click it, it will display a PDF document explaining basically what I'm going to say in this video. So you have the information in-game if needed. Very briefly, the window is organized in 3 parts. The tool panel, where we find what we need to manage some splines tools. The creation panel that contains the tools to build the splines. And the options panel that allows us to modify the way our splines are rendered. By the time you watch this video, the window organization and PDF might look different because this tool is most certainly going to evolve, but the general principles should stay the same. We're going to start by creating a new spline by copy-pasting it from the spline tray, which is available here, so there is only one object on that one. And as you can see, it displays the 2 default control points, but no model, so we have to set up a model. To do so, we must select both the target spline and the model and click the building button here. So as a quick reminder, multiple selection in YAG can be done using the control key, like I'm doing here, okay, or the selection cylinder. So let's select the spline and the statue here, click the button to get a line of statues. The model can be selected from the scene, like I just did, because it's easier for me to have my models ready for this video, but it could as well be selected on a tray. It would be all the same. Also, at the time of this recording, only simple non-animated models will work, so no human, no creatures, and no special effect will currently work. YAG will warn you anyway if you use an object that might not be working properly. Now that we have a populated spline, we can move its control points around by dragging them and modifying the spline. We can also add some points with the edit option here. So the way it works is we enable the edit mode, we add point by clicking, and the spline will be rebuilt as soon as we leave the edit mode. By the way, we have an option here to smooth the spline. So we can have straight lines between the points, or we can have curves. Okay. We can also add or remove points one by one inside the spline using the plus or minus options here. They both work the same way. You check one, and then the action will be performed on the first control point you click. So for example, I check the plus option, I click this control point, and I get a new point right close to it. Okay, and if I want to delete this point, I just activate the option, and the first control point I click will be removed, so that one here. Okay, when we have a spline, we can use it as a complete entire solid object using its selector. So we can move it, we can rotate it, okay, and we can copy it if needed. Okay. We can delete all the points of a spline with using the bin button here that will essentially reset the spline. Okay, and of course we can delete the spline entirely as we would do for any regular pawn. Now that we have seen the basics, a few precisions are needed. First, the selector cube are necessary anchors that we need to manipulate and select the spline, but we don't want them when we are finished, of course. So the option here will show or hide all the selectors at once. So basically, you check this box when you need to work on splines, and you uncheck it when you're finished. I don't think I'm going to need the second spline soon. Okay, so now let's try to build a road. So we are going to select the spline here and then the road model simultaneously. And as you can see, the result is not nice looking because at the moment the spline is just placing identical copies of the model along its line. That's why we have a second type of spline that will reshape the model along the line to get a continuous object. And when I'm going to enable it, I want you to pay attention to what's going to happen near the turns of the line where the effect will be more pronounced. So you can see that when I enable it, the objects are really reshaped, recomputed, okay, to fit the shape of the curves. And next, of course, we have a second problem, is that it is not correctly oriented. So let's turn them 80 degrees, and we can even smooth the curve out to, oops, sorry, wrong option here, smooth the road to get a very nice looking road here. All right, so use the points like splines for decoration, like statues and foliage, okay, and use the line type splines for continuous objects like roads and bridges. Now I need to take a little time on this option here, the range option. It sets the default distance between models on the spline, and it is extremely important on line type splines, on continuous splines, because those type of spline will always reshape the objects so that they touch one another. To illustrate that, I'm going to use the spiky fence here. And right at once, you can see that something is wrong. So in order for the object to look good, the distance between them has to be exactly the same as their length. And this is what this option here is tuning. It has to be a manual option for reasons that are explained in the PDF documentation, but for practical purpose, you just need to keep in mind that when the object looks funny, like too stretched, like here, or too shrunk, like here in the other direction. When the object looks funny, just check or uncheck this box to fix it, and it will be fixed in any direction you choose for the objects. Okay. Now, while we're at it, sometimes due to a bug in the Unreal Engine, the last model of the spline can be very wrongly distorted. Let me try to show you that by adding some offset, because it generally exaggerates the effects. Okay, so here we got a very nice example here. It does not always bugs, so to speak. Okay, so this one is okay, this one is okay, and sometimes okay, like so. Sometimes the last object, the end of the spline, is horribly distorted, like you see here. So again, this is a bug. So all I can do is provide you with a workaround, which is basically remove the last pawn from the spline. Okay, so it will shorten the spline a bit, but it will always look good. So if anything looks really wrong at the end of the spline, keep this option in mind. All right. Splines can be used on a three-dimensional terrain, and I have prepared a small hill to show you that. So we're going to reset the spline and assign to it this nice-looking fence here, which don't need any tuning but needs to be reoriented. Okay, so let's put the start of the spline, for example, here, and now I'm going to add a few points, and it's generally a good idea to put the points at the angle of the terrain, like you see I'm doing so, to handle the slopes correctly. And it's also a good idea to try to keep the point around the modification quite aligned. So this should do a fairly good job. As you can see, it's quite correct. So, well, as you can see, you can use your splines on a three-dimensional terrain with relief. Now for the next option I need to show you, I'm going to reset the spline again and use a different model. This one, obviously we don't need that one, and we're going to take it a bit larger so it's nice looking. Okay. You can see that by default, the mouse is not seeing the spline. Okay, you can see that the mouse cursor, which is the round sphere, okay, is going right through the spline and cannot go up. And for the same reason, if I take a pawn here, I cannot send the pawn on top of the path. You can see that basically the cursor and the mouse are not seeing the spline. So in order to activate the collisions and basically to transform any spline into a walkable path, into a ground, we have to activate this option here. And when I do that, you can see that now the mouse is seeing the spline. It can go up the path, and of course I can select a pawn and send it on top of the walking path here. Okay. The reason this option is disabled by default is that when it is enabled, of course the mouse will follow the spline, which can lead to very uncomfortable ways to deal with the spline. You can see that because of that, it's much less comfortable to move the control pawns because they will follow the spline, and it will result in unwanted situation like that one. Okay, so I'm going to put this back on the floor. So it's much more comfortable to uncheck the collision, so you can move the control pawns very easily wherever you want them to be. And when you're done with your spline and you're satisfied with it, just enable the option to allow the pawns to walk on them if needed, of course, because it will be needed for roads, bridges, walking paths, but it won't be needed for statue, decoration, foliage, and so on. So just know that the option is there and that you can have your pawns walking upon the splines. The next thing I need to explain is that we can combine splines together. And so I'm going to do this by, again, coming back to the small fence here. Maybe we don't need to these options here. So I'm going to construct two splines. So let's copy that one here. I'm going to put this one a little nearer. So let's select that one and add a few points like so. And we're going to make the same exercise with this one. Okay, for example, something like that. And for this one, we're going to set a different model because otherwise, because it will be simpler. So basically, if we want all the splines to follow the same path, all we have to do is, well, it's much nicer looking that way. I prefer that, yeah. All we have to do is select both spline and that modify one of the control point of the spline that we want to become the master spline. So if I want all the splines selected to follow this spline here, then I just modify a point. Of this spline, and you can see that both splines are aligning. Now, if I desynchronize them again by moving one around or by changing its control points, so let's make something like that. If I want both spline to follow the complex one here, again, I select both of them and I move any pawn of the master spline, and you can see that both of them will be aligned accordingly. Now, to finish the video, I would need to explain and to show you all the options that are here, but they are quite simple, and actually I thought it would be more interesting to show you this option in action by building a complex wall, a complex structure, and showing you the options together. So we're going to finish the video with that one. I'm going to create 3 splines, 1, 2, and 3. Okay. The first one will be a wall. So let's assign it, and obviously it will be a continuous one, so we're going to fix it. Is it correct that way? Yes, and we're going to take this one out. Okay. Next, for this one, we are going to use decoration, statues. And for the last one, we are going to use protection with the spike here. And again, this one needs to be tuned, something like that. Okay, so now the 3 splines are all right. So we're going to build our wall for example, putting a point here, and I'm going to add many points here, a few other like so. That should do it. Okay, and of course I want a rounded wall, much nicer here. And so what I'm going to do now is just select the 3 splines together, okay, and just slightly modify that one so that all the splines align to that one. And those two should also be curved so that they follow exactly the path of the master spline. Okay. Next, we are going to use the new option. This is what I wanted to show you. So we are going, for example, to start with the statues. We are going to offset them like, oh, what did I, 70? No, that's 7 meter. I think something like that should be okay. Of course, they are much too small, so we're going to multiply them, I don't know, maybe 3? Yeah, 3 or 4. 4 will be more majestic. We need to turn them around 90 degrees, and of course we don't need as many statues, so we're going to space them by 15 meters, something like that. It's nice looking. Now we're going to do the same type of work with the protection. So again, let's put an offset 10 meters, oh, minus 10, sorry, outside the wall. 10 meters, we're going to increase them again, maybe 2 by 2, and we're going to separate them. What would look good? 3 meters, a bit more, 10 meters, okay, something like that. Okay, the last thing we need to do is to select our spline and activate the collision so that it will act as a wall. And you can now see I can hide the selectors. I don't need it. I can uncheck everything, hide the window, and I have a very nice complex wall, you know, that is both decorated and protected. And I can take my pawn here and send him to have a nice walk. You know what? We're going to take control of the pawn, going to third person, something like that, and we can have a walk on our new wall. Oh, there is a problem with collisions. Let's go back to the wall. What happened? Oh, there must be a little hole in the mesh. I will fix that. Anyway, no problem here. Okay, anyway, we can also go under our object here, and you can see that we have a very nice and majestic looking structure. Okay, so as you can see, it's a pretty powerful tool. We can really create complex and beautiful structure in a matter of seconds. So I think it's all I wanted to say, so I'm going to end the video here. I hope you enjoyed it. If it's the case, see you in the next, and thank you very much for watching it, and see you. Bye.